We are recording. I am going to tell everybody that today is the April 26th edition of Last Week Today. I am Chuck Black. I am here with Al Calder, and we are going to look at the top stories over the last week as they appear on Freedom Forum News. Which brings me to the main question of the week. I give up, Al. What do you think is the most important story this week?
Ontario requests help from Canadian Armed Services as critical care COVID cases surge.
Yeah,
Now,
I noticed that.
I'll tell you why I think it's important, though, is that go to the story, right? It's a
Yeah.
CBC story, and
Yeah.
the headline that they have is Canadian Armed Forces sending teams to Ontario as COVID cases strain critical care capacity.
Yes.
And those just aren't the same. They just don't mesh up with the reality of things. So, and that's why I think this story is important, though, to highlight the fact that they are spewing a bunch of garbage.
I
Real.
don't know why I don't know why the CBC has such an inflammatory title. The body of the article explicitly states that the Ontario government is short critical care nurses. They're not only looking at the military, they're looking to the Red Cross, they're looking for nurses, they're looking for some doctors. They're not looking for the military. So I
It's
don't
just
know why the CBC wants to talk about the military.
they are the state propagandist, state being, of course, Canada,
Yes.
and they have got to get the message across for the powers that be, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
That message is if that message is be afraid of armed forces coming into your town. That's the message, even if it's true or not. That's still the message.
We talked about this a little bit last week. We talked about the various liberal government ministers who were promoting invoking the Emergencies Act. We talked about Jagmeet Singh, who said the same thing.
Mhm.
And I think it's an absolutely ludicrous thing. There's nobody dying in the streets. The critical care beds are filling up, but the Ford government promised a year ago to double the amount of critical care facilities in Ontario, and he allocated $2 billion for it, and no extra beds, no extra beds. This is an absolute failure of government. It's not a pandemic, it's a failure of government. I note that. Let me see if I could find it. Something that I just posted a couple days ago. There is a lieutenant colonel. This is on our focus page. It's serving as a repository for primary data information relating to the pandemic. Let me see if I can find this gentleman down here. I'm just shocked and appalled by what's going on. Hugs over Mass, Statistics Canada, Swiss Policy Research, vaccines exemptions.
They just well,
Here it is, right at the bottom. What went wrong in Canada's pandemic response? A presentation by Lieutenant Colonel David Redmond. And he said that it doesn't matter if there's a real pandemic or not. The big problem here is that we don't have the services set up to deal with it. And we've had 14 months to set up the services needed to deal with what's going on. And the fact that we haven't been able to do so is a failure of the government.
and without the Constitution in their way either, for real.
Yeah, I noticed that. I mean, nobody has a declaration of emergency for 14 months unless they are incompetent and they don't know what else to do. And I would say the federal government level, the provincial governments levels, all the way across the country, Vancouver, British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, that's all we seem able to do. But Lieutenant Colonel Redmond, the retired Lieutenant Colonel Redmond, he has a fascinating presentation on what emergency management really entails. And he talks about where the Canadian government went wrong in dealing with the pandemic, how federal and provincial leaders ignored previously developed emergency plans, and how long term care has been needlessly devastated because, we've restricted optional operations. People who have heart problems, they can no longer get in and have an operation. People with
Cancer
hip replacement.
diagnosis as well.
Yeah. And but he does say that if we decide we want to be sane, sensible, and rational,
Mhm.
and use reason and evidence, he thinks he can fix it.
All right. So I guess so I guess the other option is what we're going through.
Yeah, the other option is
Is
calling
it
in
the
the
new
army.
normal? The new normal?
The other, yeah, we're going to call in the army,
Mhm.
and we're all going to stay home, and we're going to get fat, and there's going to be food shortages because the supply chain is destroyed, and we're never going to allocate enough money so that we can get out of this situation. We're never going to have enough beds, or we're never going to do anything except lock people up, which won't help anything.
I couldn't agree more, Chuck. That's why we have, of course, there are various constitutional levers to pull. But that brings me to another story, Chuck. That's my second favorite for sure, though. The police
Okay.
come back a second time to harass the pastor, Pulaski. Pulaski. That
Oh,
was a
I
big
remember
thing.
that. He is so cool.
That's hardcore. No kidding, man. Like, the important thing is that he stood up to the establishment and won because he knows his
Twice.
rights.
He did it twice. He's from
I know.
Poland. He remembers solidarity,
Mhm.
how Poland worked itself out of communism in the early 1980s. And he knows these guys, no matter what they say they are, they're intentionally fascist. They intentionally went to his church twice during a sermon to intimidate.
For domination, a tactic to dominate and control through force.
Absolutely.
That doesn't
But
sound like law.
no, it wasn't law. I mean,
I
they
don't
went
know.
away when they found out that he wasn't going to take that
So tell me,
sitting
how many
down.
cops are like 7 cops and a nurse? Is that what they do now? Is that what the police was now?
I don't know. There was looked like about 10 people, 3 or 4 police cars.
A lot of cops, and then the one lady who was administrative. It looked like then she was the only one without a gun and a weapon to do anything but paperwork.
I agree. She was the one who's supposed to talk. Oddly enough, she looked exactly like the one who came there earlier in the month on Easter Sunday. So I was surprised she went back the second time.
She's gonna lose her tyrannical bonus then, and she better get on it.
Yeah, I love the story in Faith Wire that talked about what happened that day at the church. It's under the title, the April 26, 2021 Faith Wire post. I do not cooperate with Nazis. Polish pastor chases health inspector off church property for a second time.
That describes that perfectly. The video that I saw.
Yeah. And he was intelligent. He was very erudite. He was logical, sensible, and rational as soon as they left. But he would not walk back the position that these people were black shirts. They were Nazis. They were evil, and they knew full well what they were doing.
Mhm.
And I respect them for that.
Me too, Chuck. I love that he used language such as fascism and Gestapo, and it puts on display to people who might not understand history that well what this path that we're on is leading to from people who have been there.
No, I agree 100%. And I think that's a good. I would argue that there's more than just this one example this week. This is something I picked up right at only the last hour or so. I believe this story relates to it. Police chased out of Hyde Park in London after attacking a peaceful protest. This is a 12-minute video showing a concert, a protest concert by a band called Jam for Freedom near Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park in London. And it basically shows the last 2 minutes of the concert. Everybody applauds, and then the police barge in and knock over all the band equipment and start pushing people back and pushing people back. And then the people get angry. They start throwing rocks. They start throwing Coke bottles. They start throwing squashes, all sorts of weird things at the police, and they start yelling at the police, and the police didn't realize what they were doing. Uh, the police got afraid, and then eventually the police run away. And I think that like the Canadian pastor, the Brits are starting to fight back against this fascism, and the police are just, they don't know quite how to react. I also noticed that BBC News did an article on this as well. As there's been a lot of articles in Britain about this. It's very well known. but the legacy media mostly talks about how it wasn't the police fault, it was the protesters' fault for
You're
not,
attacked by them.
yeah, not pushing
Yeah,
themselves out.
I know. I agree with that too. I was like, this seems like a very strange way to cover what is obviously not what happened. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's why I posted the original video.
yeah,
I think it's important to look at what actually did happen, not the
I agree.
stories put together from people who never go out.
Yeah, who
Who
cares what I say about this shit if there's a video of it that you can inform yourself on?
Yes, that is actually one of our major advantages. Social media takes away the filters that the legacy media put in place.
What
We
do
are well able to make our own decisions these days.
hey Chuck, sir, what do they call that in London, the Slate Street, where they have all of the media organizations, I think?
Used to be called, it's still called Fleet Street.
Yeah.
That's where all the media organizations used to have their headquarters. I don't know if they have it out there right now. But they used to 20, 30 years ago. I also note another protest, a different sort of protest. Tillsonburg Golf Course defies Ontario edicts by opening for business. So we can go golf now.
Now, okay, I like that story very much as well. But what I found very strange about reading that
Yeah.
is this is a quote from the story, someone that they had interviewed about it who was going to go golfing, but they backed out of it, yet they came somehow and some reason to not go golfing, which I
Yeah.
found very strange that they were there to not golf. Um, I'm here to not golf, yet somehow get interviewed. And so here's what he suggested: "Quote: I have my COVID shots, so I feel safe. You know, it's because it's not like a contact sport." And I'm like, what are they publishing here? So then another one said, who was had Tea Time's book also, but changed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Quote: "The fact it is illegal and it could hurt the golf courses was Everly's response to why he didn't play. There are 8 of us that were supposed to golf, but I know that at least 4 of us, or 5, 4 of the 5 didn't come. I have enough aggravation in my life. I don't need a ticket." Like, this seems as if, what is this story about? Is the story about people getting
I
hassled?
don't know.
From the trade people?
I don't believe that many people bailed when they had a chance to go
Oh,
golfing.
my point is, I think I agree, Chuck. My point is that they're lying, is what I think.
Yeah, you think the media is lying about this?
They're the media, Chuck, as if they would lie about this stuff. Like, what is that? What do they have some vested interest in? Not, but this seems to nonsensical. The quotes don't work well together. Like,
I would tend to agree. The story itself seemed really bizarro. That's why I ended up paraphrasing so much of it. Although we as always have a link to the original story, the Tillsonburg golf course story, defying Ontario provincial order. I mean, I called it edicts. That's my political bias.
that's fair enough then.
But I really think it is an edict. I don't think it's a provincial order. I think it does not hold the force of law, at least not without going to court and being validated through court. But you're right. It's a very strange story. It was actually one of 7 or 8 stories, again with really strange political viewpoints that don't make sense to anybody who's ever really gone golfing.
Well, that's I agree with that. I golf, and golf on its own doesn't make sense. I've actually, but I've actually golfed at Tillsonburg before, and
Yes.
nice course. It's all right, and it's a good course for real. And I just wanted to put it out there in case people thought I was, so entrenched by that. I destroyed that golf course as well. Is more than it destroyed me. I golfed
Yeah,
so poorly there.
you said you were a good golfer once.
I say a lot of. Well, I was once. I used to be a good golfer, Chuck. That's I agree. I used to have a 6-pack abs too, but I also I was a good golfer, but it's such a challenging sport.
I would tend to agree. It's but golf courses are open. I bet that's not the only golf course that's open. I also note that at least one gym is open. This is a gym we actually talked about once in the past. Do you remember the Peel police officer who hugged the COVID-19 protesters and agitated journalists from Global News?
Of course, it's a big story. That was the day of the tipping point, as I call it.
Yes, he has been reinstated. He's been put on desk duty before until a more formal inquiry has a chance to adjudicate the situation. But he's at the office. He's doing paperwork. He's on full salary, and all's well that ends well, and the gym's still open.
Hey Chuck, I'm hoping that my suggesting this is gonna how it was gonna go down is recorded on the last show. I really do, because I've got this know-it-all complex. Because this is how
I
I
agree,
thought.
100%. You said entirely that this is the tipping point. This is the important event that convinces the police, convinces people that the government's stupid.
And his union is the tipping point, because I knew that they're not gonna cops are gonna say, oh well, just fire him, whatever. He shook someone's hand, let's get rid of him. The police are a very strong union and they won't put up with that garbage.
I would note that the Peel Police Association, I think it's what they call the union,
Yeah.
they were banned from they were banned from Twitter for coming out in support of the officer. So
That's
just
very important to know too.
Yeah, I think so too, because this is another example of all those things that are happening that so many people don't know about.
I agree, Chuck. I agree 100% on that. Now, what the Twitters of the world, something will have to replace it. But until then, what do we do?
Yeah,
Use it?
I don't
Can
know
you
what to
use it
do.
then? Probably.
Telegram makes a big, doesn't do a bad job. We get a lot of viewers these days from Telegram.
Yeah.
Angela Freedom, whatever she calls herself. She is setting up an Instagram page for us, and I think we'll get some good cushion out of that. And one more story. I didn't realize it at the time that all our stories are about freedom of the press and how that's not happening anymore. This was a documentary put together by UK-based Oracle Films. I called the story "Whatever Happened to That March 20th, 2021 Worldwide Protest for Freedom," or Protest for Worldwide Freedom. And this is an hour-and-a-half documentary, which was given out for free. Anybody who wants to really know what happened that day, who wants to see footage of literally like hundreds of thousands of people walking on the road, protesting, worldwide in like a dozen cities in Canada, another 4 cities in the US, across Europe, a lot in London, a lot in Germany.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
All together kind of movie it looked like.
Yeah, and they want to get some sort of an assessment about why the media refused to even talk about it. We mentioned that.
Oh, exactly. It's a great question to ask then.
Yeah, I noticed that we actually, on the day of the protests, we did a story on massive anti-lockdown protests rage worldwide, and we were wondering why nobody covered it. So now we know. At least one.
They must have seen it and stolen our idea, Chuck.
Yeah, they must have. I don't know if we're that important.
Yeah, tough world out there.
But it's useful. It reminds me that we absolutely need to go out and find our own alternative sources of information. And to that end, I'm particularly happy with this story. It's a list we've been compiling over the last 4 or 5 months, ever since the website went live. And these are 50 plus sane and informative alternatives to the legacy media. Really sensible things. Paulie St. George, who was really trendy once, Blacklisted News, which is one of my favorites. It's a news aggregator of all sorts of interesting news stories. Blacklock's Reporter, which is an old school news service out of Ottawa, full of real award-winning journalists, which has been doing some really good reporting over the last 5 years, and making money, and they're far better than anything you see in the Globe and Mail or in the Sun or in the Star. And smaller ones, little one-man operations like Black Sheep Truth Media, and Can Pauly. Can Pauly is my favorite. Mark Paraboulos is a really good guy.
Personal connection with him since we interviewed him on the show.
Absolutely,
he's a good guy.
Yeah,
but actually he has a good show too.
Yeah, the Conscious Resistance Network. You turned me on to that group, even though there's
he's got at least romantically appealing plans.
Yes. Corbett Report. James Corbett's one of my heroes. He is a Canadian living in Japan. The Dolly Vigilante. He's one of my new favorite guys. He is a Canadian living in the Dominican Republic. He's a very strong advocate of cryptocurrency. He's talking about uh, the Great Reset, how that's going to affect people financially. Uh, Diverge Media, two 25-year-old brothers out of Toronto who are just sort of learning about media. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they miss it, but every once in a while they are worth listening to because I hope they'll be good in 2 or 3 years. Druthers,
Yeah,
Sean
they also have
Jason.
nice, they also have nice equipment too, by the way.
Yeah, they have nice equipment. Druthers, who has a print publication, he might be smarter than us because he is building his own distribution network. And I think he's up to 300 or 400 or 500,000 issues every month. He does good work. I think it's important to note that he finally broke down. I'm putting in one of my pieces in Druthers in the one coming out in May.
For him.
So
That's a smart business move for him too, I predict. For real.
I think it's a smart business move for us because we get some
I
free
agree. It's
publicity
for
off of it.
everyone involved. I mean, like for him and us both then.
Yep. So all things considered, there are like 50 different outlets. The Kevin J. Johnson Show, who is my personal crazy nut bar next mayor of Calgary favorite.
He's not the favorite, he's the incumbent.
Yeah. Last American Vagabond, another one of the ones you turned me on to. Very good, very, very informative, heavily cited stuff.
Hmm.
And just all the way down the list, I would absolutely encourage everybody listening to come to our website at Freedom Forum News and look at the column Media We Follow, because we're going to keep this listing up there, and we want everybody to have alternatives to the bought and paid for legacy media.
Why do you think that's important, Chuck?
Uh, I think we need alternative narratives to understand and put context into what's going on. It's one thing to know that there's a parade going on every Saturday at Queen's Park in Toronto. It's another thing to know there's a parade and a protest going on every Sunday in Hamilton. But when you think about it and you realize that there's a dozen parades going on every weekend all across the country, and people like Chris Sky have convoys of vehicles traveling back and forth across the country going to protests.
Hmm.
And you start realizing that there's thousands and tens of thousands of people going out every weekend objecting to the way the government's doing things. Then you start saying, oh wow, I don't like the way government's doing things, maybe I should participate in this more.
Yeah. Now that brings us to a point of our failure for this too, Chuck. Is that you and me both spoke to people involved in this with Chris Sky, and we didn't. No one has anything to publish about it.
We didn't write anything about it for this week.
No one did. No one did. No one did those issues.
No, it's all really quiet. We are working on that. I wanted to mention Chris Sky. I think he will be in Montreal next Saturday. I'm hoping we will be in Montreal next Saturday to cover what's going on in Montreal on May Day.
While we're on air, Chuck, what's going to happen in Montreal, do you think?
I don't know. I think it's going to be a big protest. I am concerned that Montreal is a fairly corrupt police force. I'm also concerned that, unlike in Ontario, where the police have figured out what they need to do in order to serve the people, the Montreal police haven't got that far yet. I'm concerned about what happened 2 weeks ago when they broke into Rebel Media's houseboat, which was serving as their temporary headquarters, and seized all the equipment and arrested a bunch of them. I'm concerned about some of the other journalists who've been arrested in Montreal covering the protests. I'm concerned about the curfew. I mean, we haven't had a curfew anywhere unless there's been a war going on and Nazis were locking people up. But we have curfew in Quebec.
We had a curfew here, didn't we? Though I thought.
No, not really. No, we never had a curfew in here. We go out at any time. But in Quebec, in Montreal, if you're out after 8 p.m. and you're less than a quarter mile away from your home, you can be arrested. And if you're not a quarter mile away from your home in Quebec, the police get to ask for your papers and your reason for your going out. And if you have a dog, it's okay to walk the dog. It's not a,
Dans la belle Provence, un chien, s'il vous plaît.
yeah,
But the thing is, so the Rebel News guys are getting some pretty serious action then too.
yeah.
Even as
I got much respect for what they
walking out
do.
of his office to deal with behind the desk to deal with this,
Yeah,
you know. And the costs are crappy. I agree. So
yeah.
so I anticipate more of the same for Zenchuk.
I don't know. I hope we don't get arrested. Many of my family members are hoping we don't get arrested.
Mhm.
Uh, how do I put this delicately? My sister explained to me that Toronto is pretty penny ante compared to the big show in Montreal.
I have that impression. I really do. I really have that it has that vibe of it though.
Yeah, yeah.
But also Montreal is a fun spot too. You know, it's a place where the action happens around here.
Yes. Actually, I almost forgot. We missed the two really important news stories this week. We missed Angela Argentina speaking with Rosemary Spataro. She is a Catholic parishioner. She is a Eucharistic minister, a layperson with knowledge of the Catholic Church, who was concerned over recent directives received by the Catholic parishioners relating to COVID in various Canadian dioceses. She was particularly concerned because Catholic school children who normally receive their very first communion in grade two. It's a very important date for growing up in the Catholic uh, religion. Their communion has been postponed ever since COVID started. So some of them are going into their second year without ever having received their communion. And Rosemary's concern was that it's essentially destroying the church
It's
because nobody
considered
can receive communion.
it's considered a sacrament
Yeah,
and part of the development of a Catholic.
yeah.
I used to be Catholic and I went through this as well, you know. So I'm just
Uh,
familiar with it enough to know what they're getting at.
she was at St. Michael's Cathedral last weekend along with Angela and I, and she gave a little protest there. The Archbishop of, I think, Toronto, that's his church. And after that wound down, she's gotten a whole bunch of kind words from pastors all across the country. Pastor Coates, Pastor POUCE, uh, Pastor Hildebrand, and lots of others as well. She has also found at least one Catholic minister who agrees with her. He's in the 905, and they'll be out in the 905 this weekend doing their
Where?
own little protest march.
I'm in the 905. Where?
I don't remember offhand. That was one of my crazy phone calls this morning. But I think this is an important story. Nobody talked about Catholic sacraments before a week ago.
What was it like there on site though? Because some people that I saw at Queen's Park after were saying that what tell me about it from your perspective, what it was like.
It was quiet. It was sedate. There was barely 2 dozen people there. There were 5, 6 kids, 2 families. There was a janitor in St. Michael's who was a little concerned about what was going on, but it was almost like there was no police. There was no religious authorities, no bishops, no ministers or anything else. And I found it quiet, warm. I found it easygoing. The group there was really friendly. Angela was drawn into conversation immediately, and they kept asking me questions. They were very friendly, very sociable. I would be very happy to have a chance to sit down and talk with them more.
Well, that sounds all right then. I wasn't there. I was at the other location, so just looking for your perspective on it. So that's good.
No, that's fair. And one more piece last week. This actually came from the same station that interviewed me on Thursday. This was an interview on the Canadian Bill of Rights, government lockdowns, business closures, and forced vaccinations. This came through Stand for Thee, and their organizer, Rebecca Shepherd. And there was like 6 or 7 people on the call. And that was the first time I had ever understood the usefulness of the Canadian Bill of Rights in discussions of Canadian freedoms. Up until now, I've always been exposed to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But I do think the Canadian Bill of Rights is also a useful way to approach this.
The proposed Bill of Rights, correct?
Not a proposed bill. This is something that it was actually placed into law in the 1960s.
All right. So
It's been there the whole time.
It's
Yeah, it just is certainly a useful thing to know about. It's a 2-hour discussion. It's a little bit long, but I found it very useful.
I agree. I agree that both it's a bit long and it's very useful.
Yeah,
and I agree both those things for real though. But I like Rebecca a lot. And that's another thing too.
Yeah, I think she does really good work. She's working more on the business focus. She's working more on the legal focus. But everybody defaults to what they do best. Some of the people are just really good at shouting freedom and going on protest marches. Others are good at social media. You and I are maybe good enough to tell stories that perhaps have resonance with the great unwashed. And others have other skill sets as well. Rebecca has a useful skill set, and she's doing good things.
It's funny how these people that I have known for a year or so suddenly pop up into the same low value chain that I'm in, and I like that.
After a year, we pick up a skill set, and to be fair, some of these people we have held the line with. We have been threatened with arrest once or twice. We were at a beach party one night where the police threatened to arrest everybody, and we stood together, and you get a sense of who everybody is, and there's kind of an evil and an easy camaraderie around what's going on. I know I'm a journalist, and I want to be fair to everybody, and if, honestly, if somebody lied or was doing something wrong, I'd write about it anyway. But honestly, these people are good.
Most people stick together too.
Yeah.
And there's issues that are aren't worth talking about on air here, but was my homeroom in high school. Like there's all personalities, no matter the cause, right or wrong. There's always personalities involved.
Yeah, and I think it's also absolutely worth noting that whenever a parade's going on, the people in the parade are smiling and laughing and dancing to music, and everybody outside of the parade, they seem kind of alone and sad and wrapped up in their own selves.
But what I don't understand though, because the people that the protest parade must pass every week, why are people going outside to yell at them? Like I just or throw water bottles all the time. It's just,
to be fair, not a lot of people yelled at him. I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of another.
I agree with you. But why do people leave their apartments to go yell at these people? I still get it.
I mean, it's a divisive situation. I hope it. And with that said and done, I think I got to tell everyone it's time to remember to like, to comment, to share, and subscribe. If you like what we're doing, we need the feedback. We could use some money too. If anybody wants to help keep the lights on in this place, I would suggest. Where am I? Help fund our growth. There we are. The buttons, sometimes they overwhelm me at the end of the day.
So why not? Is this getting too full, Chuck?
Say what? No, we're doing okay.
I don't know. So, do your accountant call you telling me there's too much money here?
No, I don't remember that happening at all.
No, because those don't exist, then, Chuck. And so I will just once again thank everyone who's watching for your time to watch a show, and we beg you for a donation, as if you don't donate, we can't continue this forever. We don't need it today. It's not a crisis, but a news organization without funding will eventually have to shut down, for real.
I agree. At some point, we gotta become self-sustaining. Right now, we're doing this out of our goodness of our hearts, and we like to do more complex stories. We like to focus on it a little more, and we like to maybe do a better job.
Chuck, as of course, as the editor, has a lot of stake in the game. Me, managing partner, I'm doing what I can to keep Chuck in line.
And with that said and done, we would also encourage everybody to tune in next week. Today has been the April 26th, 2021 episode of Last Week Today, and we'll be back next Monday. It was a good show, Al.
Me too. Nice. Thanks for watching, guys.